Empath women do not usually snap in a single dramatic moment. It builds quietly, like water rising behind a dam, one unspoken "I'm fine" at a time. This story begins long before the coldness, long before the silence, long before people say, "She changed." It begins in the place where you were trained to be the safest person in the room. Here is the strange question most people never ask. What if the world praises empath women the same way it praises a bridge, not because it loves the bridge, but because it wants to keep using it? Think about that. A bridge is called strong right up until the day it collapses, and then everyone acts shocked, as if strength was supposed to mean endless carrying without maintenance. That is what happens to many empath women. They are celebrated for being understanding, but rarely protected for being human. They are admired for their patience, but ignored when they need tenderness. They are loved for what they can hold, not for who or they are. In families, she becomes the peacekeeper, the translator of emotions, the one who senses tension before anyone speaks. At work, she becomes the reliable one who absorbs pressure, smooths conflict, and says yes so the team can breathe. In relationships, she becomes the one who gives one more chance because she can feel the other person's wound, and she mistakes understanding for responsibility. Over time, her empathy stops being a gift and starts becoming a job. From a Jungian lens, this is the persona taking over. The role becomes the identity. The mask becomes so practiced that even she forgets it is a mask. She no longer asks, "What do I feel?" She asks, "What do they need from me?" And every time she chooses the role over the self, a hidden part of her goes quiet. Not gone, just buried, waiting. Notice where you are loved for what you carry, not for who you are. Write down one role you keep playing that secretly exhausts you and one sentence you wish you could say but never do. Because the moment you name that sentence, you begin to see the truth. You were not born to be everyone's emotional home while living homeless inside yourself. It usually starts with something that looks normal on the outside. Your phone lights up at 10:47 p.m. with, "Are you awake?" and you already know it will not be a quick check-in. It will be a full emotional shift, a crisis download, a spiral you will talk someone through while your own body begs for sleep. Or it is the family group chat where you somehow become the mediator again, translating everyone's anger into what they really meant, carrying the mental load of keeping peace so nobody explodes. Or it is work, where you're not just doing your job, you are absorbing everyone's tension. You read the room, soothe the ego, fix the misunderstanding, and then you go home depleted, wondering why your life feels heavy even on days when nothing bad happened. That is how empath women become emotional containers for other people's chaos. Friends vent, but the check-in rarely comes back around to you. Family members unload their stress because you listen, because you do. Not judge, because you have trained yourself to be the safest place in the room. Partners lean on your empathy while quietly sidelining your needs, and over time, the imbalance starts to feel like normal. You become the bridge again, praised for being strong, relied on for stability, and rarely maintained. The cost is subtle at first, a comment that stings brushed off with a laugh, a boundary you meant to set, postponed because now isn't the time. A betrayal you rationalize because you understand their trauma better than they do. And then there are the smaller moments that add up, the ones nobody sees. You saying, "It's fine," while your chest tightens and your throat closes, as if your own truth has nowhere to go. From Jung's perspective, this is not just personality, it is psychology. The persona, the good woman, the understanding one, the strong one, keeps smiling and functioning while the shadow begins to form underneath it. Not an evil shadow, but a truthful one. The anger you were not allowed to have. The needs you learned were too much. The resentment that rises when your giving becomes a requirement instead of a choice. Jung would say the shadow grows whenever we exile a feeling to remain acceptable. So the more you perform peace, the more pressure builds in the basement of the psyche. Eventually, that basement does not stay quiet. It leaks through the body as burnout and insomnia. It shows up as sudden numbness, sharp words you do not recognize, or a snap that surprises even you. long-term suppression always collects interest. And here is the healing turn. If you feel exhausted after being there for everyone, it is not because you are broken. It is because you have been overused. So identify your top 2 draining dynamics, the person or place where you leave feeling smaller. Then, set one simple boundary this week. Limit late-night emotional labor. Pause before you answer. Say, "I can talk tomorrow." This is not you becoming cold. This is you practicing self-love. Boundaries are not walls meant to punish people. They are the structure that makes healthy love possible. Without them, relationships become extraction. With them, connection becomes safe again. The snap rarely starts with rage. It starts with clarity, the kind that feels like cold air rushing into a room you have kept sealed for years. Usually, it takes just one moment to make the whole pattern impossible to unsee, and for many women, that moment looks painfully ordinary on the outside. You defended a friend for months, listened through every breakdown, smoothed over their mess, and then you find out they have been quietly calling you too sensitive behind your back. You carried the mental load at home for years, calendars, groceries, doctor appointments, and the emotional temperature of everyone in the house, and then the person you love most mocks the one boundary you finally speak. You were the reliable one at work who absorbed pressure and kept the team afloat, only to watch someone else get promoted because they were more visible, while your steady contribution stayed invisible, like air. You sacrificed for your children without keeping score, and later, realized you'd been treated like the default parent, the default fixer, the default one who will handle it. You showed up for an aging parent again and again, rearranging your life around their needs, and then a sibling criticizes you from a distance as if care is effortless. And suddenly, something in you goes still. Not because you are heartless, but because your nervous system recognizes the truth faster than your mouth can explain it. In that moment, you stop asking, "Why would they do this?" Because the younger part of you still wants innocence to be true. Instead, you start seeing, "Oh, they knew exactly what they were doing." And that sentence lands with weight. The betrayal is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is a small, quiet cruelty. The way they look past you when you speak, the way they only reach out when they need comfort, the way your empathy gets treated like a service they can request on demand. The clarity hurts because it forces you to grieve not only what happened, but what you kept hoping would finally happen. Jung would call this the collapse of a comforting illusion. The ego clings to the story that keeps you functioning. They did not mean it. They are stressed. They are wounded. I can be the one who understands. But your unconscious has been whispering for years through tight shoulders, a clenched jaw, dreams that repeat, exhaustion that does not lift, resentment that rises like a tide. When the betrayal hits, the psyche stops negotiating. It pulls the mask off the situation, and sometimes it pulls your own mask off too. That is why the snap can feel like numbness first. It is not denial. It is your system conserving energy. Because the old strategy of overgiving has finally failed. Now, make this practical, not just emotional. If you feel numb after a betrayal, do not rush to explain it away. Write the pattern in one paragraph, what happened before, during, and after. Then, circle the single line you have ignored the most, the sentence that stings because it is true. Was it the moment you minimized your own pain? The moment you apologized for having needs? The moment you realized you have been acting like a bridge for people who never learned to cross with care? And here's the question to answer in the comments so you stop carrying it alone. What was the betrayal that did not break you, but finally made you see? Silence is the first boundary people cannot bargain with. After the clarity hits, her behavior changes in a way that unsettles everyone, not because she became cruel, but because she stopped volunteering herself as the bridge. She does not argue. She does not plead to be understood. She does not write long paragraphs to prove she is still good. Instead, she grows quiet and starts observing. And that is when the whole room feels the shift. You can see it in scenes that used to look ordinary. It is 12:07 a.m. The house is finally asleep, your phone is lighting up on the nightstand with a familiar name, and that familiar opener? Are you awake? You already know what is coming. The emotional download, the spiral, the unspoken expectation that you will carry them back to stability while your own body is running on empty. Or it is a family gathering where the air tightens and eyes drift toward you, waiting for you to smooth it over, translate the tension, take on the mental load of keeping everyone comfortable. Or it is a Tuesday afternoon at work when a coworker drops a last-minute task in your inbox with, "Need this ASAP," as if your time exists to rescue their disorganization. When you do not rush in, when you simply say, "I can't take that on," without a long explanation, people act startled. Some get offended, some get anxious, some suddenly accuse you of being cold. What they are really reacting to is the loss of access. Here is a simple way to understand it without getting lost in psychological terms. We all have a role self, the part of us that learns how to be liked, needed, and safe. For empath women, that role is often the peacemaker, the helper, the one who understands. For years, she led with that role because it kept relationships stable and conflict low. But underneath that role, there is a truer self with real needs, real limits, and real feelings. When those feelings are ignored for too long, they do not disappear. They wait. They gather strength. So when she finally stops overgiving, it does not mean she lost her heart. It means the deeper part of her finally has a voice, and instead of exploding outward, it becomes a quiet, steady line she will not cross anymore. Before, she absorbed without realizing it. Now, she chooses with awareness. She can still care, but she no longer abandons herself to prove she cares. That is why her silence can feel terrifying to other people. They are not afraid of her coldness. They are afraid they cannot pull her back onto the bridge. When you stop over-explaining, you stop giving others something to argue with. When you stop performing kindness, your boundaries become real. And real boundaries reveal who loved your presence and who loved your usefulness. Practice the pause rule. Before you respond to guilt, pressure, or manipulation, wait 10 seconds. Put one hand on your chest to anchor your body. Then ask, am I responding from fear or from truth? If the answer is true, you may say less, not more. And when people react negatively, stay calm and repeat your boundary without defending it. Use a simple line like, "I hear you, and my answer is still no," or "I can talk tomorrow, not tonight." Their discomfort is not proof that you are doing harm. Often, it is proof that you stopped doing emotional labor that was never yours to carry. When an empathic woman stops being the bridge, she does not become colder. She becomes undeniable. The transformation is quiet, but absolute, like a fog lifting off a road she has driven for years on instinct alone. It is not a louder emotion that rises in her. It is sharper sight. Once she integrates what she's been repressing, she becomes calmly perceptive, like a room with the lights turned on after years of dimness. She hears what people do not say. She notices how compliments can be used as hooks. She catches the timing of a request that arrives right after a hard day, right when she is most likely to comply. She recognizes the pattern behind the pattern, and for the first time, she trusts what she sees without rushing to soften it. You notice it in real life in the places that used to feel normal. At a multi-generational family dinner, she realizes the teasing is not teasing. It is control with a smile, and she no longer performs laughter to keep the peace. In a long marriage, she hears the familiar line, "You are overreacting." And instead of defending herself for the 1,000th time, she goes quiet and stays steady. At work, she watches a coworker act warm in meetings but quietly take credit in emails, and she feels the old urge to smooth it over, then chooses not to. Even in dating, when someone floods her with intensity, disappears, then returns with a dramatic story, she does not chase closure anymore. Her body does not flood with panic. It stays still. That is the power she discovers. Not the power to hurt, but the power to see clearly. This is where the story becomes morally serious, because when you can see clearly, you can also strike precisely. She understands psychological weak points. She knows what people fear and what they crave. She could weaponize that insight, punish with cold precision, or win every conversation by aiming at the softest place. Jung warned that when the shadow remains unintegrated, power turns destructive, because it is driven by resentment, not consciousness. That is why some people who have been overused erupt in ways that shock even them. Long-term suppression does not disappear. It leaks. The mature empath chooses a different path. She chooses restraint, integrity, and distance over revenge. In Jung's terms, this is integration. The rejected anger does not vanish. It becomes a boundary. The repressed truth does not explode. It becomes discernment. She stops living as a reaction and starts living as a choice. And when you reach that point, clarity is not just something you feel. It is something you live by, in your marriage, in your family system, and in every place you used to abandon yourself to keep the peace. To ground this new clarity in real life, create 3 non-negotiables, such as respect, honesty, and emotional safety. Next to each one, write the first sign you will no longer tolerate. Respect might mean no raised voices or mocking. Honesty might mean no lies by omission, or disappearing when things get real. Emotional safety might mean no guilt trips or making you walk on eggshells. This becomes your early warning system, not a wall, but a compass. And here's the question worth sitting with. Now that you can see clearly, will you use that sight to win or to finally be free? She did not turn cold. She woke up, and the awakening looked strange to people who benefited from her sleep. For years, her warmth was available on demand. Her attention was on the emergency room. Her tenderness was the bridge everyone crossed without slowing down. So when she stops offering herself as a constant soft landing, it gets labeled as coldness, because that word is easier than admitting the truth. The truth is that she finally became conscious. And in Jung's language, consciousness is not a mood. It is a turning on of the inner lights. It is the moment the persona stops running the whole house, and the shadow, the repressed anger, the unspoken needs, the buried no, is not allowed to explode into destruction, but is invited into wholeness. This is what wholeness looks like in real life. She still loves, but she no longer loves blindly. She listens, but she does not absorb. She helps, but she no longer rescues. She can hold compassion for someone's pain without offering her body as payment for their healing. And if you are a middle-aged woman who has been carrying the mental load for years, the scheduling, the remembering, the smoothing, the emotional labor that keeps everyone calm, you know this moment intimately. It is the moment you realize that being the strong one has been slowly teaching everyone else that they do not have to be strong at all. It is the moment you notice you have been running on empty, yet still apologizing for being tired. The snap was not your cruelty. It was your system finally refusing to betray you. Jung would say this is not a fall from grace, it is individuation. It is the psyche demanding integrity. When the shadow is denied, it leaks out as bitterness, passive aggression, sudden outbursts, or numb withdrawal that scares you because it feels unlike you. But when the shadow is integrated, it becomes clean power. Your anger becomes a boundary instead of a weapon. Your clarity becomes a compass instead of a courtroom. Your silence becomes protection instead of punishment. That is why this awakening is so sacred. It does not destroy your softness. It places your softness behind a door you control. And here is the quiet lesson that can change everything. The people who truly love you will adjust to your boundaries. They might stumble at first because it is new, but they will learn to meet you with care. The people who only loved your access will call you selfish, cold, or difficult because your awakening costs them convenience. Let that be information, not a reason to return to the bridge. So if this feels like your story, take one honest pause today and ask yourself this question: where have I been loyal to my role, but disloyal to my soul? Then, name one boundary you are ready to honor next, even if your voice shakes when you say it. And if you feel safe, comment below. Which part of you is waking up right now, and what are you finally done carrying alone?
If this touched something sacred inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your presence here is not just support, it's resonance. And if you feel moved to give back, your donation becomes a quiet but powerful gesture that helps keep this light alive for others still walking in the dark.